You've been fighting the Harkonnens for decades.
Look!
My family's been fighting them for centuries.
Your blood comes from dukes and great houses. Here, we're equal. What we do for the benefit of all.
Well, I'd very much like to be equal to you.
Maybe I'll show you the way.
Welcome to Read, Watch, Play, your dive into the stories we love and how they're adapted. Big deal this week, we are doing our second recording from the desert planet of Arrakis, so we're bunkered down here in the Tabor Siege, covering Dune Part 2. I'm here with my pal Nick Hinkson, who is a better hype man than Stilgar. My name is Randy Burge. Here we go.
I love that one. That's such a good one.
I knew you'd like it. I was like, he'll be happy.
I appreciate that one. I try to be.
Yeah. You bring that energy for your friends. You're just always pumping them up, calling them 8 different nicknames that nobody is really sure what his name is anymore. I know we normally get right into it, but one thing that I wanted to mention today was last night we went to see a John Williams orchestra who they played half Star Wars, half Harry Potter. Just gotta say, it was awesome. Like, if you have the chance to go to something like that, pretty sick. And that is big boomer territory, I know.
And that split is like perfectly you too.
Yeah,
like
yeah, it was awesome. It was my birthday present from a couple months back. But
okay,
yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, it was
Nice.
sick. They played like clips of the movie, which was really cool, like along with the music. So the guy, like, it was pretty funny. The maestro came up and he's like, by the way, if you haven't seen Star Wars, you're going to be spoiled by the movie clips. And then he pulled a big you joke where he was like, by the way, Darth Vader is, you know what? I'm not going to say it. I was like, this is some Nick humor.
I like that guy. Never met him, but I like that guy.
Yeah. Speaking of movies, got a pretty big one. I got to know. What was your theater experience like? Dune Part 2.
I have to say, Randy, there are very few disappointments in my life that hold up to not being able to get the popcorn bucket.
I know.
Seeing
Devastation.
it the day after it came out.
Yeah.
I was literally there Saturday afternoon and they were like, oh yeah, we're way out. And I was like, way out? This is like your first showing of the day 2. What do you mean?
Yeah.
I am so sick of AMC. They have subpar popcorn. They didn't have the popcorn bucket and they don't have IMAX at that one. So I'm just like, why do I do this to myself? Why am I not just going to a Regal?
Yeah. I don't know how I feel about it is you put the butter on yourself at AMC. And I just don't know if I need that type of responsibility because I don't know if I'm underdoing it or overdoing it. And I don't want to have to walk back out to put more butter on like an absolute fat ass.
and because you're doing it yourself, you're only getting that top
You're only
layer.
getting the top.
At least at Regal, the bottom layer is a little bit buttered at least. And then you can put some extra on the top. But no, they're just...
Yeah, no, we didn't get the, I should say I went alone to this. I did not get the bucket either. They were completely out, but I don't know. I've considered the eBay route, but I'm like, that is just a level of, I don't need to go to that place in life.
Yeah. Well, especially because they're like $50 on eBay right now.
Yeah.
They're not cheap. People are really cashing in on the fact that dorks like you and I couldn't get it.
Yeah. I was watching, the cast was talking about it, and like, either this is like one of the most brilliant marketing things ever done from a movie is these buckets, because even the cast is like dunking on them in the interview, with the exception of Dave Bautista. Everyone was like, I hate this. I can only get one piece of popcorn out at a time. My hand gets trapped. I feel weird putting my hand in here. And Dave Bautista is like, no. He's like, I just kept ramming my hand in and out. Everybody's like, oh my God, Dave, stop. So it was good. So you saw it in AMC? Was it IMAX, Dolby? Give me the details.
No, it was just standard.
Just standard.
The AMC in downtown Houston has let me down time and time again.
Yeah.
And I'm calling it out. enough is enough. Someone has to stand up to them. And it's going to be me right now.
Yeah.
Because, again, subpar popcorn, no popcorn bucket, no IMAX.
Did you get any candy? Are you a candy guy at the movies?
No. So,
No.
well, yes, I am. I actually like to get Reese's Pieces and put it in the popcorn, and then you get a little bit of like peanut butter and chocolate and popcorn in a bite, and it's heaven.
Yeah,
but
messy hands.
Definitely. You need like 2.
Yeah, I was like, are you wearing a bib
for that? Just buttoning the shirt so it doesn't get on the white. I didn't get any snacks, and I had an emergency water bottle in case I started like coughing or something. But I would not want to eat or drink because I didn't want to have to get up at all during this movie for any reason.
Yeah, I went in first, and the movie theater is one of the few places where I'll drink like a regular soda just because it feels nostalgic. So I got a soda and popcorn, and then I'm sitting in there, the trailers start, and I'm like, this is 2 hours and 45 minutes. I'm going to need some candy as well. So I left all my stuff in there next to some random people, went out and also got candy. I was like, this is a new low. At the movies by myself, making multiple trips to the snack area.
Came back, half your popcorn's gone.
Yeah. It was
person next to you's like wiping their hands on their shirt
I know.
as you're walking back in.
Yeah. I was like, is anything going to happen to this? But our theater was packed. I don't know how yours was. Mine was jammed. Like Saturday night, the place was jumping.
We went to a matinee. It was like 3:45. It was an awkward time. And it was pretty full. It wasn't packed, but it was pretty full. But as we were leaving and the 7:00 crowd was coming in, the front of the theater was packed. So they had like a 7, a 7:30, and an 8. And I would imagine they were all sold out.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine. It was busy. And this IMAX, so I went to an AMC IMAX, which is not my usual theater. But I wanted to see this with the best possible sound and kind of picture. And it's so strange. It's in like this abandoned mall, and it's the only thing still in existence in this mall. So it's just like a little bit of a weird vibe, but it was pretty awesome. I had a friend in town. I was coming off like a week-long work retreat, and I was running on empty. And the fact that like this 2 hour and 45-minute movie kept me awake when all I wanted to do was head to Sleepy Town was like a feat in itself. But it was awesome. It was a great theater experience. Definitely recommend anyone, if they can see it in a theater, if they can see it in IMAX, got to do it. There's movie theater plug, at least of the week. Were you pretty hyped heading into it?
Oh, of course. I mean, we watched the first one. We talked about how good it was. We read the book. I mean, this is like the conclusion to the first one came out in 2020. So it's been a 4-year process getting through Dune. And the first one was so good that I had absolute faith in this one. And I was like giddy on Friday knowing that I was going the next day.
Yeah.
Were you the same way?
Oh, absolutely. I felt like I was vibrating walking into the theater. And it's a little sad because this is, what month are we in? March?
Mm-hmm.
This technically, I saw it in March. Almost feels like the biggest movie of the year. We're still so early in the year, which is like kind of sad. It's just going to be a weird movie year with the strikes that happened. But I mean, I'm also just massively excited for this. So I was pumped. I mean, I don't know the last movie I was this excited for prior to this one. So this was a big deal. And especially like the reviews were starting to come out, and those were good. Dune Part 1 was great. So the vibes were at an all-time high walking in to my abandoned mall this weekend. Or
were you just like walking in screaming Dune at people? Like,
screaming. No, dude, I was on so empty from the prior week. But then once I got a little bit of cherry vanilla Coca-Cola and a little bit of popcorn, I was golden. I was good to go. Before we get too far, this podcast, just if you're new here, we cover adaptations, all our favorite stuff, books, movies, games. I think this is going to be our 10th episode, which is kind of a mini milestone. We release every other Tuesday. Our format in case you haven't listened before, we chat first about the source material, in this case, the book. We get into a little bit of background on the adaptation, and then we transition fully into the adaptation, talking about the movie. Check the show notes if you want to see timestamps on where any of that happens. We're not going to be talking too much in depth on the book, as we have another Dune podcast that you can listen to where we cover the first movie, but also just our general book thoughts. So check that out if you haven't heard it yet. Nick, where can people follow our show?
Yeah, but first off, we don't have like a whole Dune podcast. We have another episode.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah.
We are not dorky enough to have a whole Dune podcast. Yeah. This is about as much Dune conversation as I know how to have. Yeah. But first and foremost, you can follow us on Spotify or Apple or wherever you get your podcasts. Please subscribe and rate us 5 stars only. It helps other people find the show. You can also reach out to us on Instagram at Read, Watch, Play Podcast. We check that every day. We would love to hear from you. And that's where we're going to post information about upcoming episodes, when we're recording, and, you know, just different polls and some fun little video bits of what we're recording here. So if you want to see our pretty faces, you know, you can definitely check us out there too.
Yeah.
Randy, anywhere else that people want to write into us?
No,
I kind of blacked right into us.
I kind of blacked out while you were talking. Did you say the Instagram or did you say the Gmail?
I didn't, but I can.
Okay.
readwatchplaypod@gmail.com.
There you go. Yeah.
I got it right. I've been practicing.
You did. Yeah. You read it from the doc. Congratulations.
I absolutely did. I did not memorize that.
No, I don't think we're anywhere else. Definitely, I don't know. If people want us to be on a different social media, let us know. We're sticking to Instagram right now. I'm probably never going to, I think we had to create a Facebook because you have to with Instagram, but we're probably not going to be active there. But I could be maybe convinced to do like a Threads or something. I've never been on Threads, but yeah, if you're
Threads
curious.
is like Twitter for Instagram, right?
I think so. So we'll see. I don't know. Social media is kind of annoying, so it's a necessary evil. Nick, we going to be spoiling anything today?
Sure are, Randy. We're going to be spoiling Dune 1, the movie, Dune 2, the movie, and I guess the book, if that wasn't obvious.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to really spoil anything from future Dune books, mostly because I haven't read them.
Yeah.
So if there's anything that we happen to say that happens in those, I think it's coincidence.
Yeah. I won't spoil anything for you. I've only read up through Children of Dune. So
is that
I won't
2 or 3?
3, yeah.
That's so you've up through. So, okay, so you've read 2 and 3.
Mm-hmm.
Got it.
Yeah, love them. Synopsis. We weren't reading the back of the book at the time we had done this. Should I do that? You think I should?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, should I grab the book? Yeah.
Let's give them the back of the book.
Set on the desert planet Arrakis, Dune is the story of the boy Paul Atreides, who would become known as Muad'Dib, and of a great family's ambition to bring to fruition humankind's. I'm not cutting any of this. I'm leaving all of it. Humankind's most ancient and unattainable dream. A stunning blend of adventure and mysticism, environmentalism and politics. Dune won the first. Oh no, that's not even a back of the book. This is
it's
a really
just that
shit
first paragraph.
It's just the first paragraph. That's it. That's what Dune is. It's about Paul Atreides. They go to Arrakis. Shit hits the fan.
Succinct. I like
it. Yeah. Man, normally I'm pretty good at reading stuff. Not there. Kind of blew that one.
You killed it. You don't have to edit any of that. Just leave the whole thing in.
Dude, I am. I'm not editing any of that. I mean, this real quick on the synopsis. So this picks up halfway through the book. I actually think it's a little bit over halfway in book form. Because movie 1 ended with the Jamis fight. Jamis. Once again, just be prepared for some pronunciations this episode again. We're back in our bag. And the second half of the movie and the second half of the book picks up after that. We'll talk all the plot changes during kind of the plot section. But yeah, I mean, it covers Paul Atreides, covers him getting ingratiated with the Fremen, getting to meet Chani and Stilgar. shows him kind of battling back and forth with like what his future holds and what decision and path he wants to take, and kind of hits the crescendo of, you know, does he want to incite this holy war? Does he want to challenge the emperor? Does he want revenge? Or does he just want to hunker down in Cabos, Arrakis, and chill with Chani in the desert? That's pretty much what happens.
I like it.
Nick, thoughts on the book? You can take this any way you want. As we've talked about it a little bit already, more in depth on the first half, but yeah, what do you think of Dune?
Yeah, I thought I would just give my quick thoughts on the whole book because it's kind of hard to talk about half a book. First things first, it's a great story. It's captivating on so many levels. There's a lot of great political intrigue. So I think like Game of Thrones, but the great houses of the planetary system rather than in one world. It's just really fantastically done there. I think the action scenes are jam-packed, but they're not overly graphic or drawn out. There's a lot of action in like very few pages, and I think that's something that's underrated today in a lot of the things that we read. So I really appreciated that. I mean, specifically, if you've watched Dune 2, think of the arena scene and that end fight. I mean, those were only done in a couple of pages, but they were done brilliantly. Yeah, they really were. I love the lore. If you start getting into the Dune world outside of the movies, you know, the Bene Gesserit, the Great Houses, the Spacing Guild, there's 1,000 hours of stuff to do. And I love something like a book series that does that.
Yeah.
Those are the positives. There are some negatives. Big one being it's a tough read. The writing is really hard to digest. You're going to have to reread sections if you're not super familiar with how fantasy writers work. I mean, you have point of views switching paragraph to paragraph.
Yeah.
And you have to just pick up on who's talking. And it's a little bit difficult at times. I didn't like that. And as we talked about in the first episode, you know, go check it out. I DNF'd this the first time I read it, and I only reread it for Randy for this podcast. So, I don't know. That's what I thought. Oh, I mean, there's some pluses, some minuses. I don't know that the pluses outweigh the minuses with how good these movies are anymore.
Yeah.
But I don't know. What do you think of the book?
Yeah. Without dwelling on it too much, I love the book. I reread it for the movie coming out. So I had read it once in 2020 in prep for the 2021 movie, and then I reread it. I was rereading it slowly over the past year, but I really hit overdrive to get prepped for the movie. And man, I loved it the second time through. I know I said I was a card-carrying Dune member, but I feel even more steeped in the Dune world now. And it does really reward you on a reread because you know who the characters are and you kind of have understanding of like the structure and how Frank Herbert writes. And I said this in the first podcast. I preferred the first half of the book originally because I just really loved the time with Duke Leto, and I loved, you know, being on Caladan, and I loved that intro dinner scene. But I really love the second half of the book when I picked this up this time. And I think that's just because I wasn't as confused as to what was happening as I was the first time. It is like, it doesn't bother me as much as it bothers you, but there was a few times where I was like, I'm really not sure what's going on or who this person is, you know, in the second half of the book. But I felt so much more grounded this time. And I loved it. And what I really loved this time was I just really appreciated Paul and Jessica's first times being in the Sieges and being in the desert. And it just has that same sense of, I love in a fantasy story when you like arrive in that new world with the character where they haven't been before. And it's like the hobbits arriving in Rivendell or like Harry getting to Hogwarts. I just love that. Like, you know, kind of you feel out of water with them and you're experiencing it for the first time. So I really love that stuff in the second half of this book. And then I agree with all the things you said. The political intrigue is, you can see how that inspired A Song of Ice and Fire, like big time. Just loved it. It was great, great stuff.
Yeah, I think those are all great points. I think maybe if I reread it, I might get some of that same satisfaction that you did, but I'm going to be honest, that's probably not going to happen. But the world wants to know, now that you've renewed your card-carrying membership to the Dune clan, would you recommend this book?
I really would. I think it not only, I mean, in my opinion, I like the way Frank Herbert writes. Like, I think the way he describes things is like really beautiful. Maybe that's just because I find like the desert beautiful, and he's like so obsessed with it. But I love this, and you can really see how influential it is to like nearly every fantasy story that came after. And while it's like so influential, it's also such a turn on the trope of like the hero or the chosen one. And Paul is like such a unique protagonist, even all these years later. Like, there hasn't been someone quite like Paul Atreides in a lot of ways for like what he represents. We could spoil a little bit of A Song of Ice and Fire, because I think there is a comp that George R. R. Martin was making, but we don't really know because he hasn't finished the books. But I love these. I think like if you've never read fantasy, or if you've never read sci-fi, like, is Dune going to be an easy read for you? Probably not. But if you love the movie, but I'd say like if you haven't and you've watched the movies and you like them, absolutely read it, because now you know these characters. It's a little bit easier because you have the faces to the names. So I definitely recommend it. What about you?
I recommend this book like I'd recommend a root canal.
Yeah, I don't know. You sound like when they say there's 9 of 10 dentists recommend something, maybe your dentist is like the 1 of 10.
Maybe,
so I don't know. I don't know how much I'm trusting him.
Yeah. No, honestly, I agree with what you just said. It is a really bad entry point into the world of fantasy. If you are either an experienced fantasy reader or someone who's loved the movies and has that familiarity with the characters, I think do what you want. But if you're only like into the movies and like I like them, they were good, not super sci-fi oriented, don't read it. It's just not a good entry point. And I think the world of fantasy is so great, and I would hate for this to be your first entry and then you be discouraged, because especially modern writers have taken a lot of the best of this Dune book, really, and the tropes and the way it's written, and made it a lot more accessible. So that's what I got. I don't, honestly, for 80% of the people listening to this, put it away.
Yeah, I cannot stand by that statement. I would say go out and read it, but
listen, we can't both be right all the time, and I'm never wrong. So,
moving into somewhat of a segue to the adaptation. What do you think the movie, as you thought about the second half of this book, what did they need to get right for this movie to work?
Yeah, I think when I thought about this question, I didn't think about it as just the adaptation of the book, but what did they need to get right to bring home building the world of Dune? And the first one is, again, you got to bring it home.
Yeah.
People liked the first movie. They were patient with how slow it could get at times. You have to make that payoff here. You have to give them what they wanted. For the core Dune audience, people who have read the book and are super into it, you have to hit at least the major plot points. Obviously you cannot adapt everything in this book into a movie, but you have to keep it pretty true to the source material. And I think DV was a good person to do that. So I had faith going in that was going to happen. But you also have to have this movie be better than the first. And that's a tall order, because the first was really good and really well done. And the reason I say that, it's really tough with sequels. And if you're building an entire world where you want this IP to go, where you can cover the Bene Gesserit, the Menotat, the Spacey Guild, the Navigators, all the lore, you want to do future books. If you have the first 2 entries be excellent, and then the third one falls flat, and the third one falls flat, people will forgive you for that.
Just have
But
Baron
if
on the
you
mind.
have a, yeah, if you have, if you have one good entry and then one bad entry, I don't think the third entry gets greenlit. So you really have to make this fantastic. And those were my keys to the adaptation for Dune Part 2. But I don't know if you thought about it the same way, or were you thinking more along the lines of what do you need to get right to be faithful to the book?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree that there was a lot of setup in part one, and people also did not know going into it that part one was a part one. I think I did. It feels like forever ago now. So it has to feel like those things that you saw in the theaters 3 years ago are kind of coming home and were important for the time you spent with the story. So I definitely agree that, you know, regardless of whether they make more of these, this is important to like land the plane on this first part of the story. Like I totally agree with that. I did think a little bit more through the lens of like the second half of the book.
Okay.
And how it might be different than the first half. And it's cliche to say, but it really does center around Paul for me. And I've seen a lot of discourse already, which I think is a good thing on this. And it's just understanding like what type of hero, using quotes, Paul Atreides is, where, you know, in the first movie, we have the setup. And even in the first book, Frank Herbert is just like playing you into his hand of this is a traditional hero. He's born to a great house. He has all these unique powers. He's almost genetically breeded to be this like perfect specimen. He doesn't want the power either, from that conversation we know he has with Leto. So he's got that like reluctant Jon Snow type of leader syndrome. He doesn't want it, Daenerys. And then it kind of really pivots in the second half, and Paul starts to be able to see the future, and he's trying to understand what his role might be. And you really just need to see like the role of prophecy and propaganda and how much of a struggle it is for Paul to decide what decisions and what paths he wants to take. And I think if you come away from this story feeling like Paul is like the hero and saves the day, like I don't think then the movie did its job of conveying like the absolute internal turmoil Paul is having over what he should do. It's something that like you need to be able to convey without having Paul's inner monologue like like they do in the 1984 Dune, where it's just like literally voiceovers for like 2 hours. You just need to understand like what is going through his mind of, you know, will this incite the holy war? Will this kill everyone that I love? Will I end humanity if I go down this path? And I think to kind of like bring this point home, it's like you just need to understand that there's not an outcome for Paul where he gets to become the benevolent ruler on Arrakis. He brings peace to the universe. He gets to marry Chani, avenge his father. Like that's just not how it's going to work for him. And I think like it really needs to like drive that point home that Paul is very conflicted and has so much weighing on him. And it's just no matter what he does, it's not really going to work out that well for him.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was kind of what I was feeling heading into this, was like super important.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I agree completely. I think it's interesting that we looked at that from different lenses, but I agree with everything you said.
Yeah.
I mean, you're absolutely right.
Yeah. I mean, we've had a week since we both saw this, a little over a week. I've seen a lot of discourse already of people like, you know, about some of the decisions Paul made in this, and also just like, is he a white savior trope, like coming into a planet, or is it like the reason Frank Herbert apparently wrote Dune Messiah was because people didn't get that Paul was supposed to be like the anti-white savior, and it's like even there is some failing of the movie, like if you don't still come away understanding like what trope this is supposed to be or what trope it's supposed to be like avoiding, which is just tough to do. Frank Herbert even failed to do it, he said. So but it's interesting. It creates a lot of good discussion.
Yeah.
So with that, a little background. We're not going to do background on the book. If you want to hear that, you can check out the other episode written by Frank Herbert. Yeah, that's all I'll say. Dune, the movie. We also covered the movie background in the first one, at least for part one. For part two, this was directed by Nick. What's his name?
DV.
Denis Villeneuve directed this. Came back. This was greenlit pretty soon after Dune Part 1. October 26, 2021, Legendary gave the official green light to Dune Part 2. And production started.
A year?
No, it was weeks.
Less than a year?
It was 2021 movie. Yeah.
I thought it came out in 2020.
No, it was a 2021. It was I think it was a same day HBO theatrical release. And one non-negotiable condition on Denis' part was that this will not release on streaming and that it will be given at least a 45-day window at the theaters. So Denis, just a man after my own heart. Which, yeah, I mean, he's got the clout now to do something like that.
Yeah.
They went right back to back production. So they started this right after he was working on the script. I mean, and we said this in the first one, but he's also in the Dune clan. He may be one of the leading clan members. He's a huge fan.
I don't know if I'd phrase it that way.
That's true. Yeah. Denny's going to be like, yo, what the fuck? He's like, I'm not even American.
Randy's going to get the Fremen knocking on his door.
Yeah, that's really funny. So Denis, he's a huge Dune fan, and he has kind of like apparently storyboarded out what he would do with kind of all of them. And we'll talk a little bit about the sequels as we get into it. But this started production right away. Released on, what would it have technically been? Was that still February? Was that February 29th? Or was that March 1st technically?
March 1st.
March 1st.
Midnight March 1st, yeah.
Midnight March 1st. I always forget how that works because March 1st was Friday. March 1st. And guess what? This movie's doing gangbusters. It's doing great. Like, I think it doubled its opening weekend box office. Its first weekend, I think it did. What did it do? I think it was 83.5 its first weekend, sitting at worldwide 223 million, according to Box Office Mojo as of today. Tracking pretty close to like how Oppenheimer did last summer, which for a weird ass sci-fi fantasy series, it's incredible. Like, this is doing really well commercially. And I think even just like the cultural buzz around it kind of speaks to that. But great opening weekend. Got both of us there.
It definitely did. And a lot of other people, apparently.
Yeah. Critical reception, been pretty stellar. Pretty great as well. A lot of positives from even people from fans of the series and I wouldn't say non-fans, but maybe non-book readers alike. Sitting pretty high on IMDb. I forget what it is on IMDb right now. I know on Letterboxd it was like a 4.6.
It's a 97 on Rotten Tomatoes.
90s, yeah. Who the fuck is that 3%? This is why Rotten Tomatoes is so dumb. It like makes no sense.
People like him.
R.I.P. But so stupid. Hate that site. But yeah, I mean, this is getting pretty rave reviews. Like, people are liking this. It's a good movie. It's a good movie to see in theaters. Anything you want to talk about? I know you were doing a little bit of research on some of the upcoming Dune installments.
Yeah, so one has been greenlit and will be coming out at a a point in time later this year that hasn't been released, and one has just been talked about. So Dune Prophecy is going to be a TV series coming to Max, and it's a prequel of the Bene Gesserit origin story. It's set, I think, like 10,000 years before the events of Dune, and it's coming out late this year. That's really all that's been released. So if you're curious on the origin stories of Lady Jessica, that's going to be, it looks like between 5 and 8 parts is what people are recommending, kind of like between like Chernobyl and like a longer series.
Yeah.
There's just not a lot of information, but they're still saying late this year. So
Yeah.
I am excited for that. I'm super curious to see who's cast and how they're portraying that. So that'll be cool. And then Dune Messiah, the movie. I cannot imagine that this isn't greenlit soon. I know DV has said that he only wants to be a part of a third movie that may or may not cover all of Dune Messiah or like half of Dune Messiah again. So when you do 223 million in your first, what has it been, like 9 days that it's been out? I can't imagine it doesn't happen. Everyone's talking about how both executives and all the creatives are like, this makes sense, let's do it. So we'll keep track of that, and as soon as it's greenlit, the next episode, you'll know.
Yeah. Nick, you want to give me a little synopsis of what happens in this movie?
Yeah, I mean, this is really the classic tale of hero turned villain ditching his wife to marry a princess after stabbing his cousin. I mean, it's the classic tale.
Yeah.
It's old as time.
Basically Princess Bride.
Yeah. Basically, it's not dissimilar. I mean, tell me I'm wrong. Like, that sums it up in a sentence. Like,
yeah, a lot going on here.
You're following the second half of, I think it's almost like Paul's descent into being a reluctant villain, as he fights to reclaim what he feels is his, and then take, what he feels he's owed.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, no matter what way you slice it, when you try and describe plot points of Dune out loud, you sound kind of like a lunatic.
Yeah. So I'm like, that's why I can't even try. I mean, I hit the major ones, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. I mean, with the book synopsis, it doesn't stray too far from what we described earlier. So got to know though, we've been teasing this. What'd you think of the movie?
It was very good. It was great. Great movie. It was fantastic. I enjoyed every minute of it. It is something I would definitely see in theaters twice. And I can't remember the last time I had a movie that I thought I would see in theaters twice. It's shot beautifully. It's action packed. I think it does a pretty good job with the world building. I mean, it was exactly the sequel we needed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, period. Hard stop.
Yeah. It's easy to be like, and it's like not great radio to just be like hyperbolic and be like, wow, this was amazing. It was exceptional. Like, it was a great, but like, it was.
Yeah.
Like, it was a very well done movie, like the full package. And I have some nitpicks, some things that I really missed from the book. Some things that I'm curious if we get Messiah, how and will they follow up on. But overall, I mean, they did such a great job with this. I mean, especially for what we said last pod was this is an unadaptable text, they've said. And Denny and the rest of the team, like, they kind of did it, and they did it really well.
Took 6 hours, but they did it.
Yeah. I mean, everything just kind of came together. Like, the performances, the visuals, the sound, the amount of plot they cover. Like, it was really well done. It was one of the most memorable theater experiences, kind of, especially with some of those visuals and just the sound effects. It was awesome. It was a great movie. Like I said, some things that I'm excited to talk about a little bit deeper that I'm even not sure how I feel about yet. I mean, yeah, we both love this movie. Let's get into a little bit deeper to the rapid fire questions.
No, because I am looking at your notes in this outline, Randy, and especially considerating. I'm absolutely putting this on Instagram because I know Frank Herbert makes up a lot of words for Dune, but I didn't know you were too.
Dude, it was Saturday night. I was doing a little spice melange. I was struggling to see the computer screen. It just happens. You get into the Frank Herbert world, you start making shit up. And that's kind of what I did.
Definitely what you did.
Yeah. Call me out again on the pod. I'm going to start using the voice against you.
Silence.
All right. Give me the rapid fire.
All right.
Pew, 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 pew.
I actually have 5 for you today.
Wow.
Is Paul Atreides the hero or the villain of the second movie?
Is this a yes, no?
It would be hero or villain. Yeah.
Because I would say neither, but I would still say hero.
Okay. What's the better look? Austin Butler with hair or without hair?
With.
Yeah, for sure. And this one you can expound on.
Yeah, I mean, he looks like a demon.
Oh, not this. Sorry,
baby.
I was going to say you can expound on the next one.
Yeah, I mean, no shade to Austin. He looks maniacal in this movie.
Yeah, he actually, it was great, and I thought that was a really good look for him for this movie.
Yeah.
I've noticed you look at me the way Stilgar looks at Paul. Why are you so obsessed with me?
No comment.
And just feel free to just expand on how awesome I am when you're answering this one.
Yeah, I mean, you're the prophet this pod needed, and you're going to lead us in the holy war.
Follow up to that: would you still love me if I was a worm?
Yeah. I got no beef with worms.
And then I guess, actually, I'm only going to ask you 4 because I didn't realize until this podcast that you had read the second and third books. Because my next question was, were the movies good enough to make you read the second book?
Yeah, I read it already. I got one real quick one for you. Dune Part 1, Dune Part 2.
Dune Part 2.
Yeah. Sweet.
I mean, it was so good.
Yeah.
And now that the first one's not excellent, but there was just... You know what? Thinking back, I don't know that that's as easy of an answer as I just gave.
It's not easy.
I still think I might say the second one, but the first one was excellent.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I mean, I mentioned Lord of the Rings nearly every episode, but it's very much like that for me, where I'm a sequel guy. Two Towers is my favorite.
Okay.
But there's so many, the beginning of things is really nice too. And I love that in Part 1. And the whole gang is still alive and together. There's always a sense of innocence with the first one.
Yeah.
Let's get into it. Keys to the adaptation. First category, casting and performances. How'd you feel about the casting and performances in Dune Part 2?
I gave it a 4 out of 5. I thought it was really great. I don't know why I couldn't give it a higher score than that. My gut was saying that not everything was perfect. And some of that might have been with the follow through, but 4 out of 5. But I'm curious to hear what you gave it and why. And then I'll back up what I just said.
I'm a 4.5. I mean, it's truly excellent to me. I don't think there's a miss on casting. There's 1 or 2 performances I wanted more from. And I'm not sure if it's the performances. And for me, that's kind of like a Raban, or not a Raban. Raban. I love Dave Bautista, but he wasn't given a ton of freedom to do much in this besides be angry, which is a little bit of what Raban kind of just does.
Yeah.
But I mean, top to bottom, this is a star-studded cast, and it's also a cast of seasoned vets, some of the best we've seen do it, with a Josh Brolin or a Javier Bardem or a Stellan Skarsgård, but also the new wave of movie stars with Timothy, with Zendaya, with Florence Pugh, Austin Butler. Like, this is packed to the gills with like top-notch talent who is just delivering, and I think will be looked back on in a really incredible way. So I really love the casting and performances. I mean, we talked about at the top, Stilgar. It's just, there wasn't much humor in the first Dune movie. Stilgar was getting big laughs in my theater with some of his stuff.
I agree that he was hilarious. That didn't work for me.
What?
Like, I was laughing, but after that movie was over, I had some problems with the way he became a meme in the movie rather than the character from the book. And I can see why they made that choice. And I honestly, like, I think you're right. I'm going to change my I'm going to give casting a 4.5 out of 5 as well. But because the more we're talking about this, the more I'm realizing my problems with it aren't with the casting, the acting, or the performances, it's the plot and how they change those characters. So
what's interesting though is you say about that. So I was sitting there in the theater and I was thinking, was Stilgar this like locked into Paul in the book? And I said no at first. But then there is a part in the book, because I had just finished it like 2 or 3 days ago, where Paul is reflecting on how he doesn't know when Stilgar shifted, but he does at some point from friend to like sort of religious follower, and puts him on a pedestal. And he feels has this pause, a sense of mourning that he lost Stilgar. And I was like, oh, this actually really did happen too in the book. I just, for some reason, I just didn't really pick up on that the first time through. And it makes sense why kind of they leaned into that really hard in this movie. But yeah, I can see why it put you off a little bit at first.
Because like, think about it in the book. He's a skilled fighter. That's how he got to where he is. He's an incredible political operator, which is how he stayed on top for so long. He's a powerful presence. And at parts, he's somebody Paul looks to for advice and guidance. And in the second movie, I feel like they only leaned into what you said, where he goes from, friend to religious follower, and then they made it a joke. And I thought it was funny. Like, I laughed. I thought it was hysterical. It wasn't until after, when I was thinking about the movie, that I realized I was missing some of what I thought was essential to Stilgar.
Yeah, he didn't have a lot of time as the sage for Paul that you kind of have in the book. But I'll just tell you the line when Paul says like about him being too humble, it was almost like Monty Python when it cuts to Stilgar with all the other guys, and he's like, "This is exactly what the movie would say." That really got me. Like, people were cracking up, and I think it did add some nice levity. Was it at the sake of maybe a robust picture of who Stilgar is? Yeah, possibly. But did it add something nice to the movie for me? I think it did.
That's fair.
And he killed it. And we didn't get to talk much about Javier in the first one because we didn't have much time with Stilgar. But he's just like, I don't know. He was awesome in this. And you don't get to see him have those kind of comedic chops all the time in like the roles he typically has. So
no,
he was.
You're right. I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. And that's why I think I have to give casting a 4. Like, I have to up my casting a little bit, because you nailed it. I mean, who else you got?
Yep. I mean, Paul and Johnny, I thought they were great. I thought Timothy and Zendaya were awesome in this movie. I had so many feelings of Attack of the Clones, like Anakin Padme, but like done well. Like,
with
especially
actual chemistry.
Yeah, but I mean, enough sand to send Anakin into cardiac arrest as well. But they did great. I thought they had awesome chemistry in this, because we didn't really get a lot of them together in part 1. And they were a delight in this. Like, they were so good. And I was skeptical at first. You're skeptical because you see and you know what Paul Timothy is going to have to do in this movie of like big speeches and be a little bit more bombastic than his character in part one. And you're like, can he do that? But then you're also thinking like, it would, even if it comes off a little bit awkward, like that's how it would be for Paul too. It's not like Paul is like some muscular, traditional, like masculine guy. And I thought he did great. I thought Zendaya was great. And super believable to me. Like all of the scenes they had together and what they were able to accomplish in this movie. So did you enjoy the Timothy Zendaya performances?
I did. I think with Zendaya in particular, I think she did a really good job with Chani's character. And Chani's character is somebody who, when you meet them in the book and when you meet them in the first movie, they're a very hardened warrior.
Yeah.
And she had to not only remain that hardened warrior, but also show that there was a soft side, in particular for one person being Paul, and maintaining both of those personas at the same time, I think is a really big ask of anybody. And I think Zendaya did it really well. And I really enjoyed her performance there. Timothy Chalamet, and I kind of see him as, this was like a follow-up to Willy Wonka. So it's like weird to see the duality of
I haven't seen Wonka
Timothy
yet.
Chalamet as an actor. And that was pretty cool. And I think Timothy Chalamet did a very good job as Paul Atreides, who's taking control of the throne. I think he did. That was excellent. I thought he did only like a really good job of being the lover to Zendaya. And I think part of that is probably in the creative direction that I was trying to go, but as like a commanding presence, especially with the use of sound in here, I think it really amplified that performance. But yeah, I thought he was very good as well. But I think you nailed it. Like there was that chemistry. I thought there was that chemistry on screen, and I was a little worried it was going to be missing. I don't know anything about their personal relationship or if they knew each other before the movie, but sometimes, actors and actors, or when actors are doing this, they just don't click, but I thought they did. And I thought they did nice. And I think that was really important.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. And it has to work for this movie to work. And yeah, they were just great. I mean, related to them, we were talking a little bit about how this is kind of the new wave of movie stars. Austin Butler, wild performance in kind of the best way possible. Kind of taking the mantle from Sting in the David Lynch Dune movie. He was great in it, and really, he had that awesome thing where he left you wanting more time with him and feeling a little bit sad that Fade does not make it to the end of the movie. Yeah, spoiler. And also, I legit could not believe. I mean, I know he's hot off Elvis with his voice mimicking, and his Stellan Skarsgård voice. I legit thought Stellan was like voiceovering Austin Butler's lines. Like it was that good. I was like, it was unbelievable to me. And meanwhile, Dave Bautista is like, nah, I'm not doing that. It was crazy. He was an awesome villain, top tier that you just want more of.
But does Austin Butler even know what Austin Butler sounds like anymore? I mean, he's just been impersonating people for the last 3 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Poor guy.
No. But that's a good point. And I'm going to bring up two people that you didn't in this, because I'm actually a little disappointed you didn't touch on either one of them, because they are two of my favorite people in Hollywood right now. I think Austin Butler, Rebecca Ferguson, and Anya Taylor-Joy are three of the best actors in Hollywood for visual acting. And they're able, and I didn't think this about Austin Butler until I saw this role. I think they portray complicated emotions with their face on a level that's almost unparalleled in Hollywood. And I think you needed that from all three of those roles, because when you think of Anya Taylor-Joy as Aaliyah, she's only in there for a minute, 2 minutes.
Did not even know she was going to be in the movie.
And she's not even speaking. She has to show, there's a voiceover for her role.
Yeah.
So she has to show all of the emotions of that speech on her face without being able to speak. Rebecca Ferguson in the first movie and the second movie, I mean, you don't get to do these inner monologues. So you have to portray what's going through their head on your face, and she crushes it. And then think about the duel scene with Austin Butler when he's going from, I've got this, to realizing that one of them's not drugged, to having, that little bit of like facial conversation with the Baron. It was unreal. That was so good. And I think all three of them are just, I guess now I think that about Austin Butler. I've always thought that about Anya Taylor-Joy, and Rebecca Ferguson has been doing it for a long time as well. So I think the visual acting was incredible from the three of them, just on their face alone.
Yeah. Did you know Anya Taylor-Joy was going to be in this?
I did not.
Actually. I had no idea. I stayed as spoiler free as I could on big pieces of this movie. So I was shook when I saw that she was Aaliyah.
It was great.
Like legitimately shook. Also did not even know like Lea Seydoux was going to be playing Lady Margot and was in it for 35 seconds. But just like blew it out of the water for that time. And I was like, man, they got, and that when we talk about kind of the legacy and future installments, it gets me really excited if they continue along with this story for some of the cast that they have for these future roles.
Agreed.
You want to talk a little bit about best casting? Give me the nominees.
Drum roll, please. And the nominees for Best Casting are Zendaya as Chani, Austin Butler as the Nabaron, Javier Bardem as Stilgar, Rebecca Ferguson as Lady Jessica, and Timothée Chalamet as Paul Atreides. And the winner is...
This is tough. I think I'm going to need a little assistance on this one. It is hard for me not to go back to Rebecca Ferguson. I didn't mention her yet because I knew she was going to potentially be a nominee. And we just threw so much love on her in our first Dune episode. I mean, she earned it. She pretty much swept our awards. She was just as excellent in this one. And I just really loved her performance and the role of Lady Jessica in these movies. It's just excellent.
If you give it to anybody else, I'm going to be really disappointed. I almost listed her like 5 times and just didn't even give you an option for somebody else.
Yeah. What's hard is I could listen to an argument for, I love Javier Bardem as Stilgar, and I think he does amazing. Of just what that role is and does for me. It doesn't hit some of the other ones that you have listed. I could listen to an argument for almost any of them. I'm a big Chani fan in the books, and Zendaya really captures that. Timothy had so much to do in this movie that he almost has the hardest performance to give. But man, I got to go Rebecca Ferguson. She's just excellent. Nice. She's excellent.
Yeah. Fantastic. I wouldn't say she steals the show because everybody else is doing a great job as well. It's fantastic. But I mean, I just feel her performance is top notch.
Yeah.
So congratulations, Rebecca Ferguson. First repeat winner.
Yeah. First repeat. The only one we didn't really touch on there was Gurney. It's great to have him back. But not quite on the level of some of these others. He was great.
It was a great performance. No shade on Josh Brolin. He was great. But it was also a very typical Josh Brolin type role.
You knew what you were getting.
And he delivered. You knew exactly what you were getting from him, and he knocked it out of the park.
Yeah. All right. Should we use this to transition to plot, execution, faithfulness to the source material?
Yeah, I mean, it's just speaking of Anya Taylor-Joy, right?
Yeah.
Big difference in the
Huge
book.
difference.
Aaliyah is a 4-year-old child who kills the Baron.
Yeah.
In the movie, she's however old Anya Taylor-Joy is and not born yet at the same time, which was like...
It was a flash forward.
Yeah,
for sure.
So do with that what you will. But I guess before we even get into our overall thoughts, should we just cover some of the big differences, like in the movie?
Yeah, you give me your list, and then I'll plug any holes that I think.
Yeah. So I mean, the first omission is, something that's very important in the lore of the Fremen is that when you take somebody's life, such as Paul taking Jameis's life in the sanctioned fight, you inherit their family and you take care of them, and that was completely cut out.
Yeah, no Jamis wife and children.
No, they cut out Thulfur Wyatt. He comes back in a similar way that Gurney does. I think that they made this change because they were focusing on the Bene Gesserit, and the Benetat just kind of got left out. There's only so much you can do in a 3-hour
they did
movie.
Film all his scenes and then they cut it after. They
also filmed the scenes of Count Casimir Fenring.
Yeah,
cut those as well.
I was bummed about that.
Yeah, so he is the husband of Lady Margot, who we just spoke about, and his role is really important because he is a confidant of the Emperor, and through him, you learn a lot about the Emperor's motives in the book. I understand why they cut him out, especially with the reduced role of the Emperor, really in both of these movies. But that was a pretty notable omission from the book because he's in a decent bit of it.
Yeah.
Also, Paul and Chani have a child in the book. The child is very young.
Yeah.
And in the attack on the siege, their child dies.
Yeah.
I think that would have been really rough to see that on screen. So I understand why that was cut. But that also was an interesting subplot that they just decided to omit completely. And then I have one more where there's a change in Chani's character and her feelings about what Paul is doing. And all I'll say about that is I think that from that standpoint, the changes that DV made to Chani's character make her a stronger and better character than she was in the book. Again, just from that standpoint.
Yeah.
But I think those were excellent decisions, and I think Zendaya nailed them.
Yeah.
That's what I got. Those were the things that jumped out at me.
Yeah.
Like as I was sitting here, it's like, oh, that was different. This was different.
Yeah.
Oh, that character was gone. Like,
yeah. I'll throw a few others, and then I'll give my score, and then let's tuck into a few of these to talk about how if they worked for us or not. I think a few of the more important ones.
Let's do it.
I also had there was created this northern Fremen versus southern Fremen mindset where the southern Fremen, I think, were the more religious, fervent, and the northerners were more skeptical. And that's more of who Chani and her sort of friends are kind of, that's that camp. And it's kind of the main, sorry, go ahead.
I was like, don't they call it fundamentalists versus?
Yeah,
they don't have a name for the new group, but the old religious sector, fundamentalists versus this new wave.
Old guard versus new guard.
Yeah,
old guard is they're almost a little bit cut off from the rest of the world, so they're very religiously fervent. I think is what they were going for in the movie, which doesn't exist in the book. There is the South is very important of Arrakis, but it's not that sort of religious divide. A huge change for me is in the movie. Lady Jessica is really the one orchestrating and spreading the propaganda of Paul being the Messiah and the Savior. And that is not how it is in the book. Jessica is almost pulling him back a little bit in the book. from that.
Mhm.
So that was a slight change. Not a slight change. That's a massive change. And I think those might be the two big ones. I think the other one for me was, just the lack of the Space Guild. And I think that ties in with what you discussed with Count Fenring, where a little bit of the political intrigue was downplayed slightly
Mhm.
to just make space for it. And I think, the thing is, there's an extensive amount of plot they're covering in this movie. And it's 2 hours and 45 minutes. And I really need the director's cut of this. I need the Lord of the Rings extended edition because it really could have used a little bit more time. So I'll talk about my score, and then I want to talk about a few of these points. I gave the plot section, I gave this a 4 out of 5 here.
Mhm.
I loved most of it. First, 90 minutes of this movie, I was drooling in the theater. I had to go get new popcorn because I ruined it. It was just unbelievable, what they were doing.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is, I know this is what Nolan said about it. I was like, this truly is Empire Strikes Back. This is unbelievable. And the rest of it was good. But I think they were moving through so much plot so fast towards the end that it was, I think, a little bit tough, especially if you're not someone who read the book. And I think Paul, I can't go south. I'm going to go south. I can't go back north. Oh, let's go back north. I think a little bit of that back and forth was tough. And it felt a little bit disappointing isn't the word, but it's almost like when we get to the duel at the end, a little bit of the setup isn't quite there for me between Paul and Fade during that fight, where it's I needed a little bit more time with Fade Routha to be fully into this and understand the ramifications of what is going down in this throne room scene. So I gave it a 4 out of 5. I want to talk a little bit about the unless you want to plug into anything there.
I do.
Yeah.
And I was going to circle back to it, but yeah.
Yeah.
So I talked to 3 people, 3 friends of mine who did not read the book, but have seen both the movies. And 2 of them went to the movie with me. One of them said they did wish it was longer because they didn't want it to end. So agreeing with you. But all 3 of them did not feel that same rush of the plot with you.
They didn't feel that.
I think that goes because they hadn't read the book, so they don't know all of the things that had been cut out.
Totally.
So for fans of sci-fi and fantasy that hadn't read the book but were excited for the movies, it really worked for them. And they were able, I asked them, did you feel lost? How did you feel about how quickly it was moving? And they were like, no, the first movie did a good job setting everything up, that we kind of saw how that was going, and they were all tracking. So I think I agree with your perspective. I read the book with you, and there were some things I wanted to see, but I really think for the casual fan, and again, my sample size is limited to 3 of my friends, it still worked for them though.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I do even have a little bit understanding after completing the reread, because even the way the trailers were pitched, I was kind of expecting a little bit of a Battle of Helm's Deep situation at the end of this movie.
Mm-hmm.
But in the book, it really does happen fast. They're in the mountain, and then the storm comes in, and they go into the throne room, and the duel happens in 3 pages. It does happen very fast in the book too. I think just movie brain is expecting big battle scene.
Yeah.
So I think that just felt it wasn't what I was necessarily expecting, and I don't have an issue with it, but there's just a little bit of me that would really love a little battle scene thrown in there.
I totally agree with you, but I came out of that theater and my roommate said he said the same thing. He wished it had been longer. And I sat there and I thought about it. I was like, no, that is exactly how it happens in the book. And I think the quickness and precision of that strike adds something to the strength of Paul Atreides as a character.
Yeah.
That it
and their
wasn't this long. Exactly. And the planning and how much he can think through everything because of his Bene Gesserit capabilities. I think it really, really was done well. And I think for me, it made it better that it was so quick, precise, and like just such a strong attack.
Yeah. I can totally see that. I still think when I think about my score going down to a 4, what that really is for me is it did feel just too Paul's decision making. You don't get the full context of like, it felt like he said he didn't want to go south because he doesn't want to incite this holy war to the fundamentalists that we spoke of. But then like 5 minutes later, he's like, he goes south. And I was like, and then he's like, okay, I don't need revenge against, Baron. I'm just going to chill at my all-inclusive resort here down in the Siege. And then he's like, you know what? F this, going north. And it just felt like a little bit fast to me. Did you felt that as a book reader?
I did.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I've said this. I gave it a 4 as well. You and I are in alignment here.
Cool.
And I've agreed with everything you said, except for maybe how quick that battle scene was.
Yeah.
But and that's when we talked about this in the first Dune. It's really hard to adapt these fantasy novels where a lot of the character growth is internal dialogue. And you did lose that here. You lost all of it because Paul says he doesn't want to go south, but then there's pages where he's talking about the different options and what the outcomes are and how if he doesn't go south, like he doesn't want to, but if he doesn't, it's going to end up being worse.
Yeah.
And you did lose a little bit of that.
Yeah.
Which I don't know how you fix it. I'm like, I feel like we're nitpicking this.
Yeah.
But.
Yeah. I mean, I think the outcome though is Chani becomes almost the mouthpiece of Paul's resistance to inciting the Holy War. And I think that is a super smart change and gives Chani way more agency and character in this book. Not that she's like not a total badass in the book, but
yeah.
I think that's actually, how they did it.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
And I like that. I thought it was great. I still would have just liked a little bit more. And I think I do stand by, I wanted one more Fade Routha Getty Prime scene. One, because the planet of Getty Prime in the movie, I just looked so cool. Like, unbelievably cool. And everything he's doing there, and like the political infighting and plots within plots that are happening with Count Fenring and Baron Harkonnen and Fade Routha, it's just so interesting that losing that and not fully getting that picture of sort of the moving chess pieces when you get to that final duel, it just left me wanting a little bit for another Fade Routha scene. I think one more I could have been satisfied.
Okay, so counterpoint to that, I think it's better to leave you wanting one more scene of him than to have one too many scenes and then have it just not work.
Yeah, I really feel they wouldn't have dropped the ball, and I just kind of really want to see the scenes on Getty Prime with Count Fenring. Like, there was one thing I could just remove from the chopping block floor, because I guarantee they were sitting in there and they were like, we cannot have this movie be 3 hours plus. And that was what they went with. And I understand why. But at home, I got all the time in the world. Just give it to me. Just put it in there.
Put it in the director's cut.
Yeah. I need it.
I bet we get one.
Yeah.
I really do.
I don't know. Apparently, Denis not a big director's cut fan, but we'll see. So I was a little dissatisfied with that. How did you feel about the change with Aaliyah? You mentioned you like the acting of Anya Taylor-Joy. How did you feel about kind of that plot change?
I just don't see how you could keep it true to the book and not have an instantly another 45 minutes. So also I think when you're using children as actors, you have to be cognizant about what you're having them portray, because it's really hard to watch them die, and it's really hard to watch them stab somebody.
Yeah.
And I also think the change of having Paul stab the Baron was like, again, it's like having a quick battle scene. He walks up and he says something along the lines of like
uncle or grandfather, whatever.
Grandfather.
Yeah.
And then stabs him. And I'm just like, that. It makes Paul's character stronger. I don't know. I think the change worked for me. I get why they made the change from both what it is, like the plot of it, and from a time perspective. So I think that, like the Chani changes, I think that was a good one for the adaptation.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't want to come across saying, hey, you should remove all the weird stuff from Dune to make it more palatable for audiences. Like I don't believe in that. Like sci-fi and fantasy should be weird, and I love that it's weird. But that's just a really hard thing, like you said, to find the right child actor, to have it not come off as like strange or a little bit laughable. Because they did it again in the David Lynch Dune. Little Aaliyah was running around there. But I agree that I think it was a good choice, especially if they continue into a third movie, where I loved it gave Lady Jessica more scenes of her talking to little pregnant belly Aaliyah. And you understood what was going on. You get a lot of that setup of the images of the fetus just like growing rapidly and her talking to her. Like, I thought it was really great setup, and it doesn't just then bloat the end. Because that was honestly one of the things that I was like most confused about reading the book the first time, was at the end. I'm like, what is going on here? Like, Paul now has a sister, and she's like 1,000 years old, but she's also in a 4-year-old body. Right. So I think it was a good choice. And with the tease of Anya Taylor-Joy, I think that this will pay off in a really big way. How they'll do it, as like Anya Taylor-Joy looks older than Timothée Chalamet, I don't know. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. The other is I do think that the change I mentioned works, of having Lady Jessica being the one pushing the propaganda, spreading the seeds. She says, start with the weak ones, start with the young ones, and just planting this of Paul. And I think it just adds more weight to her character. It adds more weight to the Bene Gesserit plot. It's not like a change from the books that I'm like willing to like die on. I'm like, wow, this was a bad choice. But I think it worked for the movie.
Yeah.
Were there any changes that didn't work for you when you think about the plot? Like, when you think about, bringing this from a 5 to a 4 for you, what do you think is the main thing that just kind of didn't fully land?
I don't think it was any one thing. I think it's a culmination of all of those little changes.
Yeah.
Add up. Eventually, there's eventually going to be a tipping point, and I think I hit it to where I had to subtract one. But one plot decision that I thought was excellent and a really strong nod to the books is every chapter in Dune starts with an epigraph, a reading of Princess Aurelian's journal that gives you insight into the chapter and what's happening and where things are going. And they added a couple of those key entries into this movie as a way to get to know Princess Aurelian. And I thought that was an excellent decision, both from giving a nod to the book and the epigraphs that are so important.
Yeah.
And it was a good way to build her character with the limited screen time you had to do so.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, speaking of, that character in this, How did you, I mean, it seemed like people were pretty shocked in my theater. I could tell you the non-book readers were that Paul like not turned down Chani. I mean, in the movie, he kind of does.
Yeah.
He pretty much, he says to her, like, I'll love you as long as I'm breathing or whatever. But people were like, oh my God, he just turned his back on her and went to Princess Irulan. And people were shocked. Like, did that work for you in the movie? Because this is not something we noted in the change, but there is the change that Chani goes off by herself then at the end of this movie and leaves Paul. And that is a change that I'm not even sure yet how I feel about it as we're talking, because it could add some really great things to the future. But given what I know of Dune Messiah, I do not understand how that's going to work.
Okay, that's interesting because knowing nothing about Dune Messiah, I loved this change. Yeah. I thought it added a lot to Chani's character, and I'm excited to see where this goes. But again, I have no idea what the future books hold for her.
Yeah, it was strange, but people were shocked in our theater that he left her hanging there, and she was not about it. And I did love that, and I think that's pretty true to Chani, where in the book she's just kind of like, okay, I love you, Usul. Tell me about your homeland. And so I mean, we'll see where that goes. One thing, we were just talking about the princess. How have we not talked about Christopher Walken yet? What did you make of him in this with the Muad'Dib?
Paul. I don't think Christopher Walken did a bad job. He would not have been my first choice of Emperor here.
I loved it.
Honestly, that's probably why I was not going to give casting and performances a 5. And it's honestly, I think if I'm like quickly looking at my notes, that's why I gave it a 4 originally, is because, or one of the reasons I gave it a 4 originally is Christopher Walken didn't work for me as the Emperor. I don't think it was a bad performance. I don't think it made the movie any worse, but I think a stronger casting would have added something to the movie.
Yeah, I thought he was great, but I think, as we think about this through the lens of the plot, it was, I just needed a little bit more time with everything that was happening outside of the world of Paul and Chani. I just need a little bit more. You want to hear the nominations for Best Movie Scene?
Yeah, let's do it.
Got a few, if you can imagine. Opening scene of Paul and Lady Jessica in the sand battling the Sardaukar. And, you get those bodies just thumping on the ground in front of them. Lady Jessica still teaching Paul, don't turn your back. So just kind of that whole opening scene of the movie. Fade's gladiator duel on Getty Prime.
It's a good one.
Paul riding the worm. Paul's speech to rally the Fremen before going and pushing the offensive against the Emperor and the Harkonnens. I had the raid on the Harkonnens where Chani and Paul are working together, fighting together. They're kind of, taking down those sand crawlers. And then the throne room scene with Paul fighting Fade. What was your favorite scene of the movie?
I will give the award to Paul and Chani. When all of the Fremen are working together, and
Such a good scene.
Specifically work together to take out that
the Thopter.
Thopter, thank you. I was going to call it a helicopter, and I knew that was wrong. The Thopter, yeah. I will say, before we move on to world building, and maybe this would have been better to discuss in use of sound, but the final battle between Paul and the Nabaran, what didn't work for me there was it felt like an onomatopoeia. I thought the sound effects for the like punching and kicking and blocking were too loud, and it threw off that whole fight for me.
Yeah.
I
didn't
felt
notice
like
that
I
at
was
all.
listening to like boom, thap, pow,
Yeah.
kick. And I was like, what is happening here?
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't notice that. But I will not allow us to move on without discussing a little bit the worm riding scene. I felt like I was elevating out of my seat watching that on screen.
Yeah.
It was so
it's
good.
really cool. They don't talk about how they do it in the book. They just talk about that he's doing it and what's going through his mind and what's going through Stilgar's mind and Chani's mind. And they had to find a way to show how you were going to get on top of this worm. And they didn't really show it in the first movie. You see people riding worms and you understand that that's a thing, but they didn't show how.
Yeah.
So for the like running across the top of that sand dune and then jumping on it, that was really
good.
Cool.
It was so good. It was really an amazing scene.
Yeah.
And apparently was done without green screen. And Nick, I've never needed special features more in my life than I do for Dune Part 2. Like, never in my life have I needed this more than to see behind the scenes on the worm riding.
Yeah.
And am I a little bit worried about saying on air the sentence, I need behind the scenes on worm riding? Yes, I am. But I need to see it. Just that, it was just so good. Everything, like, I could not believe how good that looked. And as we were talking about the best scenes within the plot, it's funny because in the book, Stilgar kind of shits on Paul. He's like, that wasn't that big of a worm. Like, 12-year-old could have written that. Where in the movie, it's, Stilgar was already in his praise the Muad'Dib phase.
Yeah. It's grandfather worm.
Yeah, it was the grandfather of all grandfathers. But it was just so good. I might one thing right before we move on, because you were talking about the duel scene. They did a great job of convincing me that Paul was going to die there. Like, I really thought, like, I don't know, Timothy's acting was just really great with like the staggered breathing. And I was like, if I didn't know how this was going to end, I could see someone being like, Paul might die here too. And then become the martyr, to incite the holy war. But just a great scene.
Yeah. I mean, I had a little bit of problem with the sound, but I thought the fight was really cool.
Yeah. World building and aesthetics. What'd you give it?
Yeah.
How do you want to talk about this?
So I think what we need to talk about is, what does it mean to have good world building here? Specifically here, and what should your aim be when thinking about not only building on a singular book that people love so much, but when you're trying to build a franchise, an IP, and when this is going to become bigger than the movie itself. And at first, I only gave it a 3 because I was disappointed with the removing of the space guild, the Benetat, like all the changes we had just talked about. I was really disappointed from a world building perspective. But when I sat back and reflected on it, I ended up upgrading it to a 4. And the reason I did that is because of how well they built out the Bene Gesserit. And I think if you try to build, and this is probably the biggest problem with the 1984 one, is you're trying to build all these different characters that have all these different lores, that have all these different characteristics, and are all really important for very different reasons. I think simplifying that in a movie is good because you now have somewhere to go with the Bene Gesserit, and you can have these completely different Dune series where you introduce a new type of character, and it's not going to feel rushed. It's not going to feel crowded. So I think DV did a really good job Just let me say DV. Okay. I'm just I think he did a really good job, and I think that was really mature decision from a mature filmmaker, and I got to give it to him that it was fantastic. The decisions he made, I think you got enough to build the worlds, give it a place to go. It's not crowded, and you've introduced enough of these different types of characters to where if you said, "Hey, a Dune show's coming out about the Menotat," because we learned about them a little bit in Dune and then a little bit in the next installment of whatever that looks like. It's like, here's a 3-part limited series and everyone's going to watch it and everyone's going to be excited. And you can even have it be about the ones you knew from the first movie.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'd agree. I mean, I think for me, when I think about the world building and aesthetics, it's like, do you create a world that is at or above sort of expectations of like what I read? Like, does that feel authentic to the story that I saw on the pages? So I think about that with the world building. And in terms of the aesthetics, like, does it feel like there was just craft and care put into kind of the production design of this? We talked about this with a little bit in Jurassic Park. It's like when they're in like the dining hall, like you can see there's like dinosaur bones built into the pillars, and it's just like the people like care, like, you know, do the costumes, like, do those look like what they described? You know, it's just that level of attention to detail there. So that's kind of like what I really look for. And like, do you abide by your rules, like, that you set up within this world?
Okay.
Or something like, you know, in Game of Thrones, they talk about in the beginning how long travel takes in the television, and then by season 8, you know, people travel from the north to King's Landing in half an episode. And it's like you start to break the rules of your own world. So I think that is another thing that I kind of consider within here.
Okay.
So that's big for me. World building and aesthetics in this one, I gave this one a 5. I truly loved it in this. Cinematography alone was unbelievable. Greg Fraser, who did the cinematography, which his other works include Rogue One, The Batman, Zero Dark 30, Mandalorian. I mean, Rogue One alone, just for giving me that Vader scene at the end in the dark hallway with the saber lighting up, like, the guy's on my Mount Rushmore for eternity.
Yeah.
But the cinematography, it was just so good in this. It's just
right.
a truly gorgeous movie, like truly gorgeous to look at. I have some bullets, but I'd just like to hear, you know, your thoughts on what you scored it.
Yeah. So overall, 4 out of 5 in world building and aesthetics, but aesthetically, you're right. It is stunning. It is fantastic. It is beautifully shot. I loved the different camera angles that they were using when you're portraying different emotions and the way they would come in and out during some of those fight scenes to not be disorienting, but give you that sense of like you're in and out of this fight as the characters move closer and further away from each other. I thought that was genius. I don't really have anything else to add. It was amazing. It was fantastic. And I think you nailed it. And, you know, Craig Fraser is very, very good at what he does. And I think he was absolutely the right choice for Dune in particular.
Yeah. Yeah. Some of the world building stuff I did really love in this too was, I mean, one, overall, just converting Dune into a movie that like looks cool. And like is palatable is an amazing feat in itself. Just all the tech that they brought, like how they have the Thopters, how they have the sand crawlers, the shields, all of it, the thumpers, all of it is just so cool. I probably give it a 5 out of 5 alone, just for how Getty Prime looked. I've never seen like a blacked out planet that looked like that with those fireworks. Like, I thought that was absolutely incredible.
Okay.
The landmines that are like sucking to the ships and blowing them up, or the sand crawlers, all that stuff was amazing. The shot of the worms just blasting out of the mountain, like incredible. But Getty Prime alone, I was like, I don't think I've seen anything like this before in a movie, and thought it just looked and was even better than what my own brain could have conceived when I read the book.
What I liked from a world building perspective about this movie in particular, and they did it in the last one too, and I think we talked about it. They do a really good job showing that different worlds will look different based on where they are in relation to their sun and what is happening.
Yeah.
I mean, Getty Prime, black and gray. The planet the Emperor lives on, that I'm blanking, very lush and more of what you would think of when you think about Earth. And then you have Arrakis, which is like this orangey yellow most of the time. And I think that is something you almost have to do when there's different worlds, but not everybody does. And it's a miss a lot of times because of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Just very good stuff. It's just like unbelievable. I mean, this is the cinematography, some of the way some of those scenes look. It's reason enough to go see this in theaters.
For sure. This is a movie you have to see in theaters. Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. And this is like, I think maybe what I lose a little bit of time this could have had in a TV show, I would never give that up for not seeing this on the big screen.
Yeah.
It's just so worth it, where it deserves that. Soundtrack, you want to talk about that?
Yeah. 4.5 out of 5. And I don't really have many comments here. I mean, the score, fantastic. I don't know that I need to say anything else about that. It was exactly what that film needed. The one use of sound that I thought was a standout here is the voice.
Yeah.
And the way they did that, especially in that final scene where Paul knocks over the Reverend Mother, like the Reverend Mother.
Yeah, chills. Unbelievable.
The silence.
Yeah.
Silence!
Yeah.
You can edit over that. Just put the voice effect on it.
Yeah.
Unreal. That is such a good use of sound. And there was an opportunity here because of Dune, and DV took it, and DV nailed it.
Yeah.
And that's my one comment for this category, because it was that good, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's just everything about this movie in terms of the sound, it's just majestic. It's just gorgeous. It's intense. And yeah, even I say it's majestic, but even when we were talking about the scene, but it's also just like that where those bodies are like hitting the ground at the beginning of the movie. It was pretty intense, like harrowing.
Yeah.
But yeah, the score was great. Hans Zimmer, delivered as always. Particularly love the main theme that came out of this, the Chani and Paul's theme. It's a beautiful piece of music. And the sound editing overall is just unbelievable. If you can, get to a theater with some good sound or watch it at home with a nice setup, it's really rewarding. It's great for that. I also gave it a 4.5 out of 5. So really excellent. Only reason I knock it a half is, I don't know. I was just thinking about like 20 years from now, will I look back and remember some of these tracks the way I do, the really, really standout ones in your mind? Like, is this the Indiana Jones theme? Does it have one of those? I don't think so. But is it an incredible for what, this movie needed? 100%. It was very good.
Yeah. The reason I knocked it a half point is I cannot get over how I felt about the sound effects in that final fight scene. It is like, I know I'm being irrational about this, but I can't shake it.
Yeah.
So we're just going to have to deal with that.
Yeah. Deal with it. Legacy standalone appeal. How do you feel about
let me say this. Honestly, no. This does not work as a standalone film. If you hadn't seen the first and you hadn't read the book and you came into this movie, it just would be weird and you wouldn't understand what's going on. It would be visually entertaining, but like as a plot, it doesn't work. And that's okay. But because of that, I had to knock it. I took a point out. I gave it a 4 out of 5 because of that.
So you took a point off because if you watch this without watching the first movie,
Yeah, like as a standalone movie.
Well, it's a
Dune
series.
2,
That makes no sense.
but that's the thing. The question is like legacy and then
No,
standalone appeal.
standalone appeal from the source material. That's like saying I'm going to knock Empire Strikes Back because it doesn't make sense without A New Hope.
Right.
Which
I agree with that.
That's not at all how that works.
But even if you're, but if
Like
you're
that's a movie, it's a series.
But even from just this book, right? Standalone from just this book, like A New Hope wouldn't be part 2 of the same book. I think because you split the book up into 2 movies, ultimately they both lose a little bit in terms of like standalone to the source material. But it's done $200 million, $220 million in like 8 days. It's a fantastic movie. If I'm allowed to put them together, like Dune 1 and Dune 2, yeah, it's got a 5 out of 5.
I think you have to. I mean, it's like if someone were to say to me, hey, I went and saw Deathly Hallows Part 2, it didn't really make sense, but I didn't see Part 1, I would just say, well, honestly, you're just a fucking idiot. Like,
yeah,
that's your own fault.
But then
like you're criticizing this on something that is your own fallacy.
No, but here's like, okay, think about Jurassic Park, right? They took that whole book, made it into a movie.
Yeah.
And it works start to finish in one movie for the whole book.
Yeah.
And here, I think it was the right choice to split them up. But I'm still not going to point. When I think of standalone, like Jurassic Park as a movie, standalone compared to the book, perfect, right? Yeah, we both rated it so highly. And if you're going to, you can't give them the same because of the way they did it, I think. I think you have to look at, there has to be a differentiator there. And I think that's it. Even though it's the right decision, I think Dune 1 as a standalone movie, even compared to the book, works. Dune 2, there's so much context that's needed. I'm having trouble justifying what you're saying is like, you have to see part 1 to see part 2, but then like, well, did Jurassic Park not do a better job than Dune because they did a whole book in one? Like, is that not a bigger feat that they accomplished?
I don't think so. I mean, this is 800 pages.
I'm struggling with it.
Yeah. I think I gave this a 4.5.
So we're not even that different in our score.
But I think your logic doesn't make sense because earlier you said you had friends there who never read the book but completely understood everything that was going on in part 2.
Right, because
I know you like these movies better than the book. So I'm just like, if you were to say, not sure what the legacy is going to be, or,
the legacy is fantastic.
Or I miss some of those things, from the book. But if those are the things you don't like about the book, and you said all of those did really well in the movie, I don't understand the logic.
My logic is something has to separate. I get why movies or books are split into 2 movies, but then you also have directors who have taken Jurassic Park is a long book too, and they took that and they did it in one movie. And I think, not that I think one is right or wrong, but for people who have been able to do it brilliantly in one, I think there needs to be something that ranks it a little bit higher. And because Dune was 2, it's a limitation of kind of how the source material is set up. And it doesn't mean it was bad, because I think obviously I know this was excellent. There has to be something that differentiates it, and that's it for me. Because like Jurassic Park, I can't give Jurassic Park and Dune a 4 out of 5 and a 4 out of 5 and then say, Spielberg did better because he did it in one versus, I don't know. I'm trying to differentiate between those types of movies and the types of movies we're going to be talking about. And
I mean, Jurassic Park for sure is a 5 in this category, but it felt like a weird hill for this to be the stand on.
That's fair.
But I mean, and I think I give it a 4.5, and I think it detracts from what they were able to accomplish. And I think the decision, if anything, to split up adds more to the legacy and appeal of this because we saw what the product looked like when they tried to put this entire book into one movie in 1984. And it was, by most people's account, bad. I have a soft spot for it, but by most people's account, bad. Like, truly a horrible movie. Massive flop. And so I think the decision to split this up only bolsters the appeal of this franchise out to people outside of the books.
I'd say it bolsters the legacy of it, but as like a standalone, I still have to. I can't give it the same score as Jurassic Park.
Yeah, but you could still give it a 4.5. I guess you don't even need to give it the same score, but yeah, I don't know the rationale.
I had to think of a different, like when I was thinking about it, there needs to be a difference between that and this. And I honestly think the Dune movies together are better than Jurassic Park in my mind in terms of legacy and the impact they'll have on my life. But thinking about
we're just going to shut this pod down now.
I had to draw the line somewhere. This is the line I drew, and there's no backing down. This is it for me, Randy. Yeah. This is the best I got.
But this is totally distracting from the point that this is a excellent entry.
This is going to be our highest ranked entry of the podcast.
I don't know. You're not that far above Argyle.
I think I am actually, but well, I'll let that slide. That mark, because I gave it 9, 13, 7. I gave it a 21 out of 25, and you gave it a 22 out of 25.
22 and a half.
22 and a half. I mean, this movie's fantastic. The series is excellent. I think it's going to be talked about as, of our generation, one of the best sci-fi films to come out, or series. It just is, and or sci-fi fantasy. Because it's kind of both of them. But
I mean, I think it's going to clean up at the Oscars next year. I don't think I don't say that in I think it's going to win Best Picture, because I think we have a long way to go before anything like this. But I think in terms of, I don't know, I could see. I hope at least be nominated for Best Director. I think it's going to clean up at all the under categories of costuming and production design. It's 100%.
Absolutely.
It's going to win all of those.
It's a lock.
Yeah, but I don't think we'll get the Return of the King type sweep, but I think we'll see a lot of awards being thrown this way.
I don't think we get Best Actor, because some Oscar bait film is going to win that. It does every year.
So your boy Cillian Murphy's Oscar bait.
No, he's the exception. He's But you know what I mean? Like, there's going to be Oscar bait movies that come out.
I don't even know you anymore. I don't know what you mean.
Yeah, I actually forgot that he won for Oppenheimer just now when I said that. So,
well, he hasn't won yet. It's tonight.
Is it tonight?
Yeah,
the
tonight.
Oscars.
Yeah.
If somebody else wins, then that works, and we're leaving it in. And if it doesn't, if he wins, we're cutting that. But I think honestly, there could be a couple noms for Best Supporting Actor and Actress from this movie.
Yeah.
I think they're only going to give it to one person from Dune. They'll ultimately decide. But I think there could be a couple. So I think they'll get noms in that category. And I absolutely agree that, for score, visual effects, cinematography, costuming, all of those, it's a really strong contender. Not even knowing what else is coming out this year, it's going to be really strong because it was that good. Yeah,
which I mean, I think that's the big point. Is the Oscars are not going to be like this tonight's Oscar, where there's a lot of great movies that came out last year. The movie schedule's a little more suspect than last year.
Would you say? Sorry, go ahead.
Nothing.
Would you say that if Dune had come out last year, that you would still feel this way about Oscar noms?
It would be. I mean, I don't think anybody's stopping the Oppenheimer train this year. But I think it would have created a lot more. It'd be great to have another horse in the race like a Dune Part 2 that seems to be critically and audience beloved. It'd be great to see Denis going against Nolan in this. I think it's a pretty much shoo-in that Oppenheimer is going to win Best Picture. But it would have been great to see Denis maybe in the Best Director camp. I don't know. There's just so many good movies in kind of this current year's one. So
yeah,
we'll see. But I agree with what you said. I think this is going to be 20, 30 years from now. This is going to be a sci-fi hallmark that people look back on and love.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see future entries too.
Yeah, totally. So we're total scores. Total 43 out of 50. I gave a 4.5 in casting. You gave a 4.5. We both gave 4s in plot. I gave a 5 for world building, and you gave a 4. For soundtrack, we both gave 4.5s. For legacy standalone appeal, I gave a 4.5, and you gave a 4. Even though you just said people are going to love this in 30 years, you gave a 4. Makes sense. So 43 out of 50. Award winners? Oh, wait. Who won the movie? Who stole the show for you?
Rebecca Ferguson. Sorry. Not deviating on that one at all.
Not giving a second nomination?
Nope. No.
Yeah. I'm going to give... I would nominate Denis because just an absolute achievement of what he did over these 2 movies. But I don't know. I do love Rebecca Ferguson. Yeah, we can give it to her as well. I'll throw you a bone. I'm
a stan.
Yeah, she was great. So best scene you had. I would go the worm riding scene. You went with the Paul and Chani doing the Harkonnen raids. Rebecca won for casting, and she stole the show.
I will say I was torn between the worm riding scene and the Paul and Chani scene, and the reason. Never mind, we already talked about it. I don't need to talk about it again.
Yeah, but both are great. Do you recommend the movie?
Absolutely. Yeah, I do. I think if you get the opportunity, if you're listening to this and haven't seen the movie or read the book, go see it. If you have already seen it in theaters, go see it again. If you find somewhere that has the popcorn buckets, tell us know.
Yeah, we'll fly there, or we'll pay you $3.99 for it. Nice. Anything else you want to share?
No.
Cool. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. Next episode, we will be returning to the video game world, covering the 2021 Uncharted movie, adapted from the video game series of the same name. This was a pretty meaningful one for me, as I love those games. I have fantastic memories playing them. And also, we were in person for this one. So
yeah,
this one's a big deal. I flew out to Houston. We recorded it in Nick's living room. It was a lot of fun. We had a special guest, a small puppy, hanging next to us in the chair. So our first guest on the show. As always, if you have any thoughts or questions, you can reach out to us via email, rewatchplaypod@gmail.com, or message us on Instagram at rewatchplaypodcast. Find us on all your major platforms, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcast. Please rate and review. Those those things help more people find the show. And most importantly, please tell your friend about the pod if you're enjoying it. That sounded more like the garbled voices at the beginning of the movie than it did the voice.
Yeah.
Thanks to everyone listening. Thank you, Nick, for joining me. May your knife chip and shatter, which I guess that means we're fighting right now, but whatever.
Yeah, it's You got to throw a line from the movie in.
Yeah, you gotta. Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Take it easy.